noticed something was off the first time my mother-in-law looked at my daughter after she turned 3. Not in an obvious way. Nothing you could point to in a room and say, that right there is suspicion. It was smaller than that, controlled. The kind of thing that hides behind polite smiles and casual questions that don't sound like questions at all. Her name was Diane, and she had always been particular. Not cruel, not warm either. Just the kind of woman who believed she understood how things were supposed to be and quietly judged everything that didn't fit that structure. When my husband, Caleb, brought me home the first time, she studied me like I was a resume she hadn't decided to approve yet. I remember her handshake, firm, brief, the kind that says you're being evaluated even when no one says it out loud. But she accepted me, eventually, or at least she stopped making it obvious that she hadn't. After we got married, things stayed polite. Dinner visits on holidays, short phone calls, occasional comments that sounded harmless if you didn't listen too closely. You're lucky Caleb works so hard. Some women just aren't natural mothers, but you seem to be adjusting. Little things like that. Enough to make you wonder if you were imagining the tone, but not enough to call it out without sounding paranoid. When our daughter was born, everything shifted. Caleb cried in the hospital room when he held her for the first time. I remember that clearly. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt real and soft and uncomplicated. Diane came in a few hours later. She didn't cry. She smiled, though, the practiced kind. "She's beautiful," she said, leaning over the bassinet. And then, after a pause that lasted just a second too long, she added, "She doesn't look like anyone in the family yet." I laughed it off at the time. People say things like that all the time when babies are new. Genetics take time to settle. Features change. It didn't feel worth reading into. At least not then. But I noticed she kept saying it. Over the months, every visit had some version of it. "She has your eyes, I think. She's going to grow into her features. She's interesting looking for now." Not insults, not compliments. Observations that never fully committed to kindness. Caleb always brushed it off. "That's just how my mom is," he'd say. "She overanalyzes everything." And I believed him, mostly because I wanted to. When our daughter turned 3, she was a bright, energetic kid. Constant motion, constant questions, constantly pulling us into her world whether we were ready or not. She had my laugh. That was the one thing everyone agreed on without hesitation. Caleb would pick her up and spin her around the living room, and she'd squeal so loudly it made us both cover our ears. Those were the moments that felt like proof of something stable, something real. But Diane started showing up more often, unannounced. "I was in the area," she'd say, even when the area was 40 minutes out of her way. At first, I thought she just missed her grandson. That's what I told myself. That's what Caleb told himself. But then she started asking questions that didn't fit casual conversation. Not directly about me. About timing. About memories. About things that didn't matter unless you were looking for inconsistencies. "When exactly did you two decide to start trying? How long did it take you to conceive again?"
"You were working that job back then, right? Full-time?" She remembered details better than I did. That should have been my first warning. The day everything shifted started ordinary enough. Saturday morning, coffee on the counter, our daughter sitting on the kitchen floor stacking blocks into something that looked nothing like what she intended it to be. Diane arrived just after 10, no warning. She brought pastries from some bakery I'd never been to and smiled like she belonged in our routine. Caleb wasn't home. He had gone to pick up something for work, so it was just me and her. She watched our daughter play for a while, unusually quiet. Then she asked, casually, "Do you ever think about how children resemble people they've never met?" I blinked at her. "That's kind of a strange question," I said. She smiled faintly. "Is it?" I shifted slightly in my seat. "Kids look like who they look like." She nodded slowly, like she was accepting that answer but not agreeing with it. Then she stood up. "I need to use your bathroom," she said. Nothing unusual about that, except she didn't come out for a long time. Long enough that I started to notice it. Long enough that I started to feel uneasy without knowing why. When she finally returned, she was holding her purse a little tighter than before. "Your house is very clean," she said. "Thanks," I replied. Her eyes moved briefly toward the hallway. "I should get going," she added. And she left. Just like that. No lingering goodbye. No extra comment. No attention to our daughter, who was now happily lining up blocks like nothing had changed in the room. I stood in the kitchen after she left longer than I needed to. Something about the visit felt incomplete. like I had missed a piece of a conversation that hadn't actually happened out loud. That night, after Caleb came home, I mentioned it. "Your mom was here earlier." He looked up from his phone. "Oh yeah?" "Yeah. She asks some weird questions." "What kind of weird?" I hesitated, because saying it out loud made it feel more real. "Just about when we had the baby. Timing stuff. Nothing specific." He shrugged. "She's just curious. You know how she is." But I didn't know how she was. Not really. Not in a way that explained the feeling I couldn't shake. 2 days later, I noticed something missing. A small envelope from our kitchen drawer. It wasn't valuable, just some old medical paperwork from the pediatrician, routine stuff we'd never thrown away because we never thought about it. At first, I assumed I misplaced it. Then I remembered Diane in the hallway, in the bathroom, and the purse she held a little too tightly when she left. A cold thought formed before I could stop it. No, that's not possible. But I checked anyway. The drawer was already organized, nothing else disturbed, just that one envelope gone. I didn't tell Caleb, not immediately, because I needed to be wrong first. I needed to find it somewhere stupid, somewhere normal, somewhere that made all the suspicion collapse into embarrassment. But I didn't. And 3 days later, I got a phone call that changed the direction of everything I thought I understood about my own family. From a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice. Careful. Controlled. "I think your mother-in-law took something from your house," she said. I froze. "Who is this?" I asked. A pause. Then she said something that made my entire body go still. "I work at the lab she visited." And suddenly, the missing envelope wasn't just missing anymore. It was evidence. I didn't answer right away. I just stood in the middle of my kitchen holding the phone, staring at the counter like it might explain what I was hearing. A lab? My mother-in-law? A missing envelope? None of it lined up in a way that made sense for a normal family problem. And I kept telling myself that's what this had to be. A misunderstanding, some paperwork mix-up, something boring enough to collapse under its own weight once I actually looked at it closely. But the woman on the phone didn't sound like she was guessing. She sounded careful, like she had already decided how dangerous this was and was trying not to say too much too fast. "Hello?" I finally said. "I shouldn't be calling you," she replied immediately, quieter now. "But I saw your name connected to the file she requested." My stomach tightened. "File?" I repeated. There was a pause on the other end, like she was weighing how much to say. "A DNA comparison request," she said. For a second, I actually laughed under my breath, but it came out wrong. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "There has to be a mistake. Why would she—" "I'm not guessing," the woman cut in, still calm but firmer now. "I'm telling you what I processed." The words landed heavy. Processed, not speculated, not assumed. Processed. I turned around slowly and leaned against the counter, trying to steady myself. "You're saying my mother-in-law ran a DNA test on my daughter?" I asked. "I'm saying she submitted samples," she corrected, and requested comparison results. My throat went dry. "What kind of samples?" I asked, even though I already felt the answer before she spoke it. There was another pause. Then she said it. "Cheek swabs and a hair sample." My vision narrowed slightly, like the room had pulled in closer. "She took hair from my daughter?" I asked. "I can't confirm how she obtained it," the woman said carefully, "but it was submitted with your daughter's identifiers." I closed my eyes for a second, and in that moment I saw her differently. Diane in my hallway, Diane in my bathroom, Diane holding that purse too tightly. Not visiting, not casual, collecting. "I need to know something," I said quietly. "Okay," she replied. "Did she get results back?" Silence, long enough that my body started to understand what my mind didn't want to accept. "Yes," she finally said. My grip tightened on the phone. "And?" I asked. Another pause. Then, more carefully than anything she had said so far, "That's why I'm calling you." Something in my chest dropped. Not just fear, recognition. Because this wasn't about curiosity anymore. This was about confirmation. "What did it say?" I asked, my voice barely holding steady. The woman hesitated again, then spoke in a lower tone. It suggested a non-parental match on the paternal side. I blinked. Once, twice. Like the words needed time to translate themselves into something understandable. "That's impossible," I said immediately. "That's not possible." "I know," she replied quickly. "That's why I pulled the file myself. I thought it was a lab error." My pulse was loud in my ears now. "So it is an error," I said, already trying to latch onto that.
I checked it twice, she said. And I'm telling you, the sample integrity is consistent. That phrase hit harder than I expected. Consistent. Not wrong, not contaminated. Consistent. My hand moved without me thinking, and I sat down at the kitchen table, like my legs had decided they were done participating. This doesn't make sense, I said again, but now it sounded different, smaller. I know, she repeated, but there's something else. I swallowed hard. What else? A long pause. Then she said it. She didn't only test your daughter. I froze again. What? I asked. She submitted a second sample for comparison, the woman continued, an adult male reference. My mind jumped instantly. Caleb. Of course it was Caleb. That had to be it. That was the only explanation that made sense. Some misunderstanding about paternity, some paranoia, some overstepping concern twisted into something invasive. She tested my husband, I said quickly. No, she replied. One word. Flat. Certain. My entire body went cold. She didn't use him, the woman said. The second sample was not your husband's. The silence after that felt unreal, like the world had stopped translating language properly. Then whose was it? I asked. The woman exhaled slowly on the other end. That's the part I don't think you're ready for, she said. Something in me snapped at that. No, I said immediately. Don't do that. Just tell me. Another pause. Then she said, it matched someone in our system with a previous submission tied to a different name your mother-in-law has used before. I blinked. What name? I asked. The response came slower this time. Not your husband's legal identity. My grip on the phone loosened slightly without me realizing. What are you talking about? I asked. What does that even mean? I shouldn't be telling you this, she said, sounding more uncomfortable now. But I think she's been tracking more than one family line. And the results she was looking for, they weren't just about your daughter. My mind started racing. If it wasn't Caleb, then who? And why would Diane need another man's DNA on file? I stood up too quickly, pacing into the living room now, my thoughts breaking apart into pieces that refused to stay organized. This is insane, I said out loud, more to myself than her. I agree, she said. That's why I called you. Because after the results came back, she didn't request clarification. My stomach tightened again. She requested deletion, the woman finished. That stopped me. Deletion? I repeated. Yes, she said. Complete removal from the lab system. I went still. Because that wasn't something someone did when they were curious. That was something someone did when they got an answer they didn't want anyone else to see. Or when the answer was worse than the question. I need to see everything, I said immediately. I can't send you internal files, she replied quickly. But I can tell you. No, I cut in. I need proof. I need to know exactly what she tested, what she found, everything. A pause. Then she said something that made my chest tighten all over again. If you come in, she said carefully, you need to be prepared for the possibility that your daughter's results were never the only thing she was looking for. I stopped pacing. What are you saying? I asked. Another silence. Then finally, I think she was trying to confirm whether your daughter belonged to the person she suspected, or to someone else entirely. And in that moment, I realized something that made my entire understanding of my family feel unstable, because this wasn't just a DNA test anymore.
It was a question someone had been building for years, and I didn't even know what the question was yet. I didn't go to sleep that night, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't trust what sleep would do to my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw fragments of what the woman from the lab said, replaying in different order, shifting meaning each time, like my brain was trying to solve a puzzle it didn't have all the pieces for. My daughter, DNA samples, a second man, and Diane. Always Diane at the center of it. By morning, the house felt different. Not physically. Nothing had changed. The same couch, the same framed photos on the wall, the same quiet hum of a refrigerator that had been slightly too loud for years. But I noticed everything now, like I was inside a version of my life that had been slightly tilted off its axis. I made coffee and didn't drink it, just held the mug, thinking, waiting for something to make sense. Caleb came downstairs around 7:30, like he always did. Same routine, same tired expression, same casual stretch like the day ahead was predictable. "Did you sleep?" he asked. I almost laughed at that. "No," I said honestly. He frowned slightly. "You look like you didn't?" "I got a lot on my mind," I replied. That wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. He kissed the top of my head like he always did before leaving,
grabbed his keys, and paused at the door. "You're okay, right?" he asked again. That question used to feel like care. Now it felt like distance pretending to be concern. "I'm fine," I said. He nodded and left, and the second the door closed, I picked up my phone. I didn't call the lab again, not yet. Instead, I called the one person I knew would answer without hesitation. Diane. She picked up on the third ring. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, voice warm in a way that suddenly made my skin feel wrong. There it was, that version of her, the one she used when she wanted something to sound normal. "Hi," I said carefully. A pause. "I was just thinking about stopping by later this week," she added. "I haven't seen the little one in a few days." "Actually," I said quickly, "can I ask you something?" Another pause, slightly longer this time. "Of course," she replied. I walked into the living room without realizing it, lowering my voice instinctively. "Did you go to a lab recently?" I asked. Silence. Not immediate denial. Not confusion. Silence. That alone told me more than I wanted it to. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said finally. My grip tightened on the phone. "You know exactly what I mean," I said. "Did you take my daughter's DNA somewhere?" Another pause, then softly. "Where did you hear that?" And that was it. Not, "That's ridiculous." Not, "Absolutely not." Just deflection. Controlled, careful, intentional. "You went into my house," I said, my voice shaking now, despite my effort to keep it steady. "You took something, and I just got a call from a lab." She exhaled slowly, and for the first time since I had known her, she didn't sound composed. She sounded tired. "That shouldn't have happened yet," she said quietly. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean yet?" I asked immediately. A pause, long enough that I could hear my own heartbeat. "I was trying to protect you," she said. That made something in me snap. "Protect me from what?" I demanded. Another silence. Then she said something that changed the entire shape of the conversation.
"From not knowing what's been in your family longer than you realize." I stopped moving. "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked. Her voice lowered. "You should sit down," she said. "I am sitting," I replied sharply. A breath on the other end. Then, "Your daughter's results weren't the only ones I requested," she said. My mind went cold. "What other results?" I asked. She hesitated again, and I hated that hesitation more than anything, because it meant she was choosing her words like they mattered. "They weren't just comparing her to Caleb," she said finally. I swallowed. "Then who?" Another pause. Then she said it. "You." The word didn't register at first. My brain refused it. "What?" I whispered. "I submitted your sample too," she said. "From the house. From something I had access to." My breath caught. "You took my DNA?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. "I had to confirm something," she said quickly, "before I told you anything." "That's illegal," I said immediately, instinctively. "I know," she replied. That was the first fully honest thing she had said. Silence stretched between us again. My mind was trying to rebuild reality in real time, and failing. "Why would you test me and my daughter together?" I asked slowly. A long pause. Then she said, "Because I needed to know if the connection I was seeing was genetic or not." My stomach turned. "What connection?" I asked. Her voice dropped even further. "The one between your daughter and the man I believe is actually her biological father." Everything went still. Even the air felt like it stopped moving. "That's not Caleb," I said immediately, sharper now. "You already checked that. You said—" "I know what I said," she interrupted. "And I know what the first comparison suggested. That's why I ran the second." My head was spinning now. "You're not making sense," I said. "Just tell me what you're saying." A pause. Then she finally said it. "I think your husband is not who he says he is." That sentence didn't land all at once. It broke apart in my head, piece by piece. Your husband, not who he says he is. And suddenly the DNA test wasn't just about paternity anymore. It was about identity. Where is he?
I asked quietly. Another pause. I don't think he's the one you think he is, she repeated. My voice dropped. You've been in my house, I said. You took my child's DNA. You tested me. You tested my husband. And now you're telling me he's not who he says he is? Yes, she said simply. My grip tightened until my hand hurt. That's insane, I said. Then explain the match. She replied immediately. Silence. Because I couldn't. Not yet. Come to the lab, she said after a moment. I'll show you everything. But you need to understand. This is bigger than you think. My throat felt tight. Bigger how? I asked. A pause. Then, carefully. Because the man you're calling your husband, his DNA doesn't just match your daughter in a way that raises questions. My stomach dropped. It matches someone else we've been tracking for years. My voice barely worked. Who? I asked. And her answer came softly, but it hit like a collapse. A man who legally doesn't exist under the name you know him by. I drove to the lab before I fully processed the decision. That's the only way I can explain it now. It wasn't calm. It wasn't rational. It was movement. Pure reaction.
Like staying still would have meant letting my mind catch up to what it already didn't want to believe. The whole drive felt wrong. Every red light felt too long. Every green light felt like it came too fast. My hands kept tightening on the steering wheel without me noticing, like my body was bracing for something I couldn't name yet. A man who legally doesn't exist under the name you know him by. That sentence kept looping in my head, stripping everything else down until only that remained. Caleb, my daughter, Diane, and something underneath all of it that I had never been invited to see. When I pulled into the parking lot, the building looked ordinary. That bothered me more than anything. I don't know what I expected. Something colder, more sterile, more dramatic. But it was just a low office building with tinted windows and a small sign out front. Like truth was something that lived in places that looked completely forgettable. Inside, the air felt too clean. That sharp, sanitized smell made everything feel slightly unreal, like I had stepped into a version of the world where everything had already been decided without me. The woman from the phone was waiting near the front desk. I recognized her immediately. She didn't smile. That was the first thing I noticed. Just a nod. "Thank you for coming," she said. I didn't respond. I couldn't decide if I was grateful or furious or both at the same time. She led me down a hallway lined with doors that all looked identical. Each one closed, each one quiet. Like secrets were stored in plain rooms with no intention of hiding, just waiting for the right person to open them. We stopped at a small office. She closed the door behind us, and then everything changed. Not immediately, not dramatically, but in the way she placed a thick folder on the desk and didn't sit down right away. "I'm going to show you what we found," she said. I stayed standing. "I need you to understand something first," she continued. "This isn't just a simple paternity discrepancy. It's a pattern." "That word again," I said quietly. She looked at me. "Because it is one." She opened the folder. Inside were documents, charts, DNA comparisons, names I didn't recognize at first, followed by identifiers that looked clinical and detached, like they were trying to strip identity down to something measurable. Then I saw my daughter's file. My breath caught slightly, but I forced myself to look. She turned the page, and there it was, the comparison matrix. My daughter's DNA, Caleb's DNA, my DNA, and then another column, a fourth profile. "Who is that?" I asked immediately. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she slid the page closer. "This is the part I didn't want to tell you over the phone," she said. My stomach tightened. "Just tell me," I said. She hesitated, then finally spoke. "This is the profile your husband's samples consistently match under alternate identifiers." My mind stuttered. "Alternate what?" I asked. "Names he has used in previous submissions," she said carefully. "Different records, different legal identities depending on the jurisdiction." I shook my head slightly. "No, that's not possible. Caleb is Caleb. He has a driver's license. He has a job, a history. People know him." She nodded once, like she expected that response. "That's what makes it harder to see," she said. "Because the documentation exists. It's just not consistent across systems." I stared at her. "You're telling me my husband has multiple identities," I said slowly. "I'm telling you," she replied, "that the genetic profile associated with him appears in our system under more than one name." My pulse was loud in my ears now. "And my daughter?" I asked. She turned another page, and that's when I saw it, the connection map, Lines, overlaps, markers I didn't fully understand, but didn't need to in order to feel what they implied. My daughter's DNA didn't just match Caleb, it matched the alternate profile more strongly than anything else, more strongly than mine, more strongly than anything I thought I understood about family. That doesn't make sense, I whispered. It does if the person you believe is her father isn't the same person genetically represented in your records, she said. I felt like the room had tilted slightly. You're saying he's not her father? I asked. I'm saying, she replied carefully, that the person living in your home under that identity is not genetically consistent with the records tied to that identity. My voice dropped. So who is he? She looked at me for a long second before answering. That's what your mother-in-law was trying to confirm. The words landed heavier this time, because suddenly Diane wasn't just suspicious. She wasn't paranoid. She was tracking something she had clearly seen before I did. What did she know? I asked. The woman exhaled slowly. She didn't trust the identity your husband was presenting, she said. She believed he was connected to a separate biological lineage that had been resurfacing in our system through unrelated cases. I shook my head again, more forcefully. This is insane, I said. You're talking like he's some kind of missing person with multiple identities. He's not. He's my husband. The woman didn't react. She just looked at me. Then explain why your mother-in-law risked a criminal charge to obtain samples, she said. Explain why she isolated your daughter's DNA specifically. Explain why she tried to erase the record the moment she got confirmation. My throat tightened. She erased it? I asked. Yes, she said, immediately after receiving the final match confirmation. I felt something cold settle in my chest. She didn't want it traceable, she continued, which means she didn't want anyone else to find it. I sat down finally, because my legs didn't feel stable anymore. What are you not telling me? I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she slid one final page across the desk. This, she said, is the part she never expected you to see. I looked down, and the name at the top of the page made my stomach drop in a way I wasn't prepared for. Not Caleb, not the alternate identity, a third name, a name I had never heard before, but one that, according to the file, had been linked to both of them, and to my daughter. I looked up at her slowly. My daughter is connected to that? I asked. The woman nodded once. Yes, she said quietly. And your husband, she added, is connected to it first. Everything went silent after that. Not metaphorically, literally. Like the building itself had stopped making noise. And in that silence, I realized something that made my entire life feel unstable in a way I couldn't undo. The man I married wasn't just hiding something. He might not have been the beginning of the story at all.
He might have been in the middle of something that started long before I ever met him.